You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. We already know EFT helps with stress, but could it actually change how your genes influence anxiety and inflammation? Tune in today to find out more. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we explore the profound impact EFT tapping can have on our lives, reaching far beyond what many of us might imagine. Our guest reveals how tapping guides us beneath the surface to uncover and release hidden emotional patterns stored in our bodies, impacting our mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Lauren Fonvielle is an accredited emotional freedom techniques trainer, specializing in helping clients overcome stress, anxiety, trauma, and negative thought patterns. With extensive training through EFT International, Lauren empowers individuals to use EFT for emotional and physical healing. She also integrates yoga, meditation, and sound healing into her practice, offering a holistic approach to wellness. Lauren is committed to creating a supportive space for personal growth, helping clients achieve emotional resilience and inner peace. Let's meet Lauren Fonvielle. Hi, Lauren. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because EFT tapping is one of my favorite things to talk about, and I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you this morning.
Yeah, it's my absolute pleasure. And a lot of people actually do know about EFT. I feel nowadays it's becoming more and more popular, but there are so many listeners out there who may have never heard of it. So I'm very excited to shed some light on that and dispel some myths and really get the word out about EFT. For starters, would you like to share a little bit about yourself and maybe some pieces of your journey or your story that connect to what you do today, and share with our listeners what it is that you do today?
Yeah, absolutely. I came to find EFT through my own healing journey and really trying to figure out natural ways of managing my anxiety and stress. And so that, for me, that journey started with going to yoga on a regular basis. And then being in the yoga studio, I was exposed to all sorts of people that were into different types of healing and energy work, from Reiki and sound healing and different health coaching. And so I had joined a health coaching group. And then when I was in that group, that coach had brought in an EFT practitioner. And I think when I was first introduced to it, the idea of tapping on yourself to feel better seemed a little weird to me. But then I was in this place where I was willing to try anything to feel better. And I just started tapping. And in that first group tapping session, I noticed a difference. I could feel my body feeling calmer and more at ease. And I was surprised by it, if I'm really being honest, but I was very curious about what was actually happening, like in my brain, that this was making me feel better. But it was enough for me to want to continue to tap. And I started exploring it on my own and then started working with a practitioner. And then I just kept going from there and ended up taking my certification and going on to become a trainer. So now I can train other people to be certified in tapping.
That sounds like an exciting journey, and I'm really glad you actually came across EFT because many people don't find it until much later in their lives or when they've already had a lot of challenges and never get to experience the benefits early on that could be very helpful in their lives. Let's talk a little bit about what EFT actually is or what it stands for. You touched on the fact that we'll be tapping on things on our body. So let our listeners know a little bit about what that means and what tapping actually means in that sense as well.
Yeah, absolutely. EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques, and it's this process of gently tapping on certain points of the body while simultaneously acknowledging the emotions that you are feeling. When I'm introducing it to someone who's completely new to it, I often compare it to acupuncture. When you go to an acupuncturist, they take those tiny little needles and they put them in at certain points of the body. With tapping, we're applying acupressure to some of those same points. And the points that we're applying pressure to are at the end points of the meridians. And the meridians, if you've ever been to a yoga class or been to an acupuncturist, they'll often talk about that. It's how energy moves through the body. Sometimes I think of it as like if you have a hose in the garden and there's a kink in the hose and the water isn't flowing all the way through. If you have a kink in your energy system, you're not going to be feeling your best. And tapping helps to unkink yourself. I know that can also be a kind of out there way of thinking about tapping. Oh, my energy is all in knots. But there is a lot of science. And I know before going live, we talked about wanting to talk about the science. And there is a lot of science that backs this up. And I know that Dr. Peta Stapleton has done so much work in doing these studies. And there's lots of resources on her website that people can look at. But one of the ones that really stands out to me is that tapping on the points has been shown to reduce the cortisol levels by up to 43%. That's a really big number. And so cortisol is the stress hormone. And if you're able to reduce that, you start to feel calmer and more grounded in your body. And I think most of us, if not all of us, want to be making decisions from a calm, grounded place instead of that frenetic energy of feeling completely overwhelmed and not being able to think straight. And tapping helps to ground you and calm you down.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. And I love talking about the science behind EFT because I feel like it is actually one of the methods and approaches that's been studied comparatively quite a lot. I think we have over 400 scientific studies available now just around tapping and EFT. So it is something that has been relatively widely studied for what is termed an alternative approach. And there are so many benefits that have been found to come from EFT. And adding to what you shared about the cortisol levels, also addressing anxiety. I think some of the studies have shown effects on depression, on energy levels, on weight control. So, a lot of different things that we can affect with EFT. And of course, when we are addressing things on the energetic level, this ripples through into our physical and mental lives as well. So we have effects that come from the energetic level, but then affect different conditions and challenges that we might be facing physically as well. EFT is one of those things that seems deceptively simple, but has massive consequences positively in our lives. I'd love to talk a little bit more about what that actually means for people. So, if you are working with clients, for example, and you're having sessions with them, what does that actually look like? Can this be done over Zoom, for example, or do they have to come and be with you? I'm just going to let our listeners know here that if you want to explain any of the tapping points, for example, we'll talk them through maybe where these points are because they can't actually see you in the video. We'll talk them through if you want to where the points are. But let our listeners know, what can they expect if they actually wanted to come to a tapping session with you? What does that look like?
Yeah. As you mentioned, tapping can help with such a wide variety of conditions. I've worked with people that are dealing with just feeling really overwhelmed and anxious all the time, and they're trying to figure out how to feel better. I've worked with people that have these limiting beliefs about not feeling good enough. And that is really affecting how they're showing up, not only in their business, but in their personal life. Yet again, I've worked with clients that have physical issues that they've gone to doctors, everything seems normal. There's no real reason why they're dealing with this pain in their body, and tapping can help with that too. And the way that a one on one session works is that it can be done virtually. Actually, all my clients right now are virtual, but of course, it can be done in person as well. I say it's like adult Simon Says, because I'm tapping on a point and you're tapping on that same point, mirroring it and repeating after me. When working with a client, it's really a collaborative experience. So it starts off with a discussion of what it is that you are dealing with and what's the main emotion if you can identify. Because sometimes in the beginning, people can't identify what the emotion is, but maybe what it is. I'm really sad about this thing that just happened, right? So we start with wherever you are. And that's the beauty of tapping, is that it meets you wherever you are. And it always should be gentle. And you never have to go faster than you're comfortable with. And so we have a conversation about what you've got going on. And then as a practitioner, I'm looking for the things that really stand out to me. And sometimes that means I notice a shift in your body language when you're saying something like, oh, that seems like it was a little intense. Then we put words to it. So it's my job as a practitioner to really reflect back to you the things that you have said. And I always tell my clients that sometimes I'll intuitively add something in, but if it doesn't feel right to you, then let me know and we change the words. As we go through that, you as the client, it's your job to just notice how you're feeling. Just tune in. Notice if there's a physical sensation that you become aware of. Notice if there are different thoughts that are coming to mind, or sometimes old memories begin to make their way to the surface. And those memories that come up don't always make sense. It's not always linear with what's going on. It could be something that happened as a child. And my first thought when first introduced to this was like, oh, that has nothing to do with what I think is going on. But I promise you, if you have some sort of memory coming up, there is a reason for that. And tapping is a beautiful way to explore it. And ultimately, it's a very collaborative experience where we just go and connect the dots one at a time. And we see what you're feeling. We put words to it. We tap with those words. Another thought comes up. We put words to it. We tap with that. And oftentimes it leads you somewhere that you never would have expected. And that's where true healing can begin.
That sounds really fascinating. And there is one thing I want to ask you about, because often when we start working on issues that we may or may not be aware of, once we start really leaning into them and start talking about them, it can happen that we feel re traumatized. And often this happens also in talk therapy or other approaches. I have always had the sense in my own work that EFT was a little bit different, and I was able to actually work on a lot of different past traumas and a lot of things that happen without re traumatizing myself. How does that work when you are working with your clients and they have some big T traumas, or they have things that have challenged them in their early childhood or even in adulthood later on? Why does EFT do such a good job, and how does it do such a good job of helping us resolve and process these experiences without adding to our trauma?
Yeah, I love that question. I think what I always like to say is that you never have to like dive into the deep end and start just talking about all these traumatic things that have happened to you. You never have to say anything that you don't feel comfortable saying. There's lots of techniques with this. Sometimes it could be, let's just say, for example, you were in a really traumatic car accident and you don't want to go into all the detail of that, right? That seems too heavy, too much. But there's an emotion that's associated with it. Maybe it's a fear or a sadness or an overwhelm. And as long as you have that feeling, you can just have a very generic tapping phrase of the night of the accident. And you're still going to be processing those emotions that are associated with it. You can also do just tapping and breathing. So if you feel yourself getting to that heightened state, the practitioner can guide you through, okay, let's not put words to it. Let's just tap and breathe until we can bring that down to a more comfortable level, because your comfort is really important throughout this process. There's ways of creating this space between the traumatic memory and present day so that you feel more comfortable. So, for example, or another example is like, what if we put this experience on the other side of the world and it's that far away? It's not like, oh, just right next to us. It's all the way over there. Does that make a difference in how it feels? So, lots of different ways of backing up so that you're not in the throes of it.
That to me has always felt very gentle and doable, even when I was working on bigger things and even a lot of subconscious work in my own life. It's one of the many reasons why I really appreciate EFT and working with it. So beautifully explained, and thank you for that. I am wondering a little bit if maybe we want to give one or two points to our listeners. I know that they can't see you, but I can see the movement that you're making when you're speaking. Do you want to maybe explain to them We have one point that we obviously use to start with, and there's also another point which is quite common to just tap on its own, even if we're not doing a full sequence, because usually we would do a sequence of multiple points. Would you like to maybe share a couple of those points with our listeners? So if they are having a challenging situation, or they're feeling like they're in very acute distress, or they're feeling like they're having a panic attack or anxiety, maybe one or two points that they could come to in those situations to start off with.
Yeah, absolutely. The starting point is the pinky side of the hand. I tend to tap with my right hand on the pinky side of my left hand, but you can do vice versa. So if you're a lefty and it feels more comfortable to tap on the pinky side of the right hand, you can do that, or you can go back and forth. And that's a nice place to just take some nice deep breaths, tap on the points. Another one is the collarbone point. So this is a common point that I find myself naturally touching during the day, just bringing one hand to my chest, really spread across my chest, and the index finger and the thumb are going to be touching both of those points. So you can just tap with the one hand on those points, or you can bring two hands up and tap on the collarbone points separately. That's also very, very common to be like a favorite point. Oftentimes, my clients will say that they have a favorite point. There's really no rhyme or reason to why a point is your favorite. It's just what feels best in your body. And then another common one that I find that people often just touch on their own and don't necessarily realize that it's a point is the sides of the eyes near the temples. And so some people would just naturally come here and rub, maybe because they're feeling a headache, or there's tension going on, or they're just overwhelmed. And so you can always tap on the points, or you can apply light pressure and just massage the points, and that can be really helpful as well. And again, tapping or massaging these points and taking some nice deep breaths is going to begin to lower that cortisol level. Then the added component of speaking out loud, acknowledging how you feel, is going to take that to the next level. But even just tapping and breathing on any of these points is going to really help you to feel a little bit better in your body. And then one other set of points that is not part of the typical protocol, but I like to share with my clients, because sometimes if you're out in public and you don't want to, let's say one of the points is the top of the head, right? I always say, if you don't want to be tapping on your head and having people look at you like, what is that lady doing? It's a little bit more incognito, a little bit more discreet, right? So if you just squeeze at the bed of the nail on any finger, those are also points. That can be your hands are in your lap at work. Maybe you're in a meeting at work and people are saying things that are triggering you. You can just squeeze those fingertips, take some nice deep breaths. And again, it's going to help to lower that cortisol.
I love that. I'm squeezing as you're talking. And maybe our listeners, if you're not doing anything that's using your hands like driving or anything like that, please don't take your hands off the wheel. But if you're somewhere where you can have your hands free, you can give that a try as well. Just take your finger gently and squeeze the bottom of the nail bed, like Lauren said, and you can squeeze it from the in and outside with your thumb and index finger of the other hand. And there are, like Lauren explained, on these points, usually the in and outside of each finger at the nail has some kind of meridian that usually ends or starts there. We are working with our whole energy system in the body by tapping or massaging these points. And the same when you talked about the collarbone point, that one is for the kidney meridian. And so we are really activating or calming different energy highways in our body. And I love actually the garden hose analysis that you gave before, because it's exactly what it's like. So we are unkinking, unplugging, or maybe even steadying some of those energy flows to help our bodies come into proper alignment with that. And for those of you who might be wondering a little bit, I think we touched on that before too, is this energy, this idea of energy and it being quite woo. I think we also have a lot of studies now available that actually prove that we have meridians in our body where energy flows. And this is no longer a science fiction idea. These are things that we have proven now. Working with our energy really is to this underlying essence to our mental, emotional, and physical health. And it's often a part that gets left out. And as Lauren said, it could be one of the reasons why people go to the doctor several times. Their labs are normal and they still have no answers, because that piece of working with our energy is missing. Let's go through maybe, we mentioned that there is a protocol that we follow in EFT. Can we maybe explain to our listeners what that looks like? Obviously, we don't have to go through all the points, but let's maybe take them through something that they could say, even for if they're feeling a lot of anxiety or a lot of stress, if they're feeling those cortisol levels rising, something they could maybe say and tap on the side of their hand, or something to dip their toes into working with EFT.
Yeah, absolutely. We do what's called a setup phrase when we're tapping on the pinky side of the hand. And that kind of looks like this. So even though I'm feeling fill in the blank, I love, honor, and accept myself. Even though I'm feeling really anxious right now, I love, honor, and accept myself. Or even though I'm feeling really angry right now, I love, honor, and accept myself. Now, sometimes people have a hard time saying, I love, honor, and accept myself. It's not always an easy thing for people to say. So, if that is really an uncomfortable phrase for you, we can change that a little bit. Something like, even though I'm feeling really anxious, I trust that it's going to be okay. What we want to focus on is what we're saying feels really true. It's important that the words that we use feel really true. Even though I'm grieving right now, right here, right now, I'm acknowledging it. There's different phrases that we can say, but it's just acknowledging in the first half of that phrase how we are actually feeling. And then in the second half, something a little bit more positive, but that yet still feels true. I think I talk about that a lot when I teach workshops is people will say to me when we're saying, I'm feeling anxious, anxiety, I'm so anxious, that it feels like I'm tapping in something bad. And I want to say, no, that's not what we're doing. We're acknowledging how we actually feel. That's the difference. We're holding space for how we actually feel. Because there's another train of thought where people might say, okay, I recognize that I'm feeling really anxious, but instead I'm going to go to the opposite end of the spectrum and say, I'm feeling wonderful. Life is great. But then there's a disconnect between what you're actually saying and how you actually feel. So I just wanted to point out that with tapping, we are focused on how we are actually feeling with the intention of moving that needle towards the better thought or feeling. So if you're coming into a session saying, I'm feeling really anxious and overwhelmed, maybe the better thought is like, or you start to naturally think, okay, I've been really anxious and overwhelmed before, and I've gotten through it, right? Like this feeling of I've gotten through it and I'm going to be okay. Or tomorrow's a new day, right? Or we might have some natural thought that just comes up that feels a little bit better. And then in time, we continue to move that needle and we can get to that place of, I feel wonderful. And you can say that and it feels really true. And that's very different than just giving lip service to something.
That's a really good point. I feel like when you don't fully buy in at some point, it does create this disconnect of what you're saying and what you're feeling and makes that a little bit more difficult to work on. So that's a really excellent point. Now, can we talk a little bit about the timing of EFT? Because I feel EFT has the potential to work very quickly. And I've also heard that from a lot of people. So, what is your experience when working with clients? How long does that usually take? And I know that's a bit of a loaded question because obviously you have a wide range of challenges that people work on. But in general, what's your thoughts on how quickly EFT works and the spacing of the sessions when people want to work on certain things?
Yeah. Like you said, it does depend from person to person on what your issue is, how long you've been dealing with this issue. But in general, what I have found and why I've designed my one on one program to be 8 weeks is because I found that meeting once a week for 8 weeks has been a good point where people feel not only feel comfortable with being able to tap on their own, because it's always my intention to really empower others to be able to continue to do this work on their own. Because a lot of people come in saying, I don't know what to say. By the end of the 8 weeks, it's like they have an idea of, okay, I have a better gauge of what I should say and how this actually works. Also, that most of the time, people can really feel a difference from the beginning to where they are now and feel that shift in the body. I found that 8 weeks is usually a good amount of time. But then again, there's some clients that come in and they have a big shift in the first session. Sometimes it takes longer. And I think there's also a component of your readiness for healing, which can be a sticky subject because you ask somebody who's dealing with pain, whether that be physical or emotional, if they're ready for healing, you're going to be hard pressed to find someone that says, no, I'm not ready. Most people are going to be like, duh, yeah, I'm ready. What I mean by that is really your willingness and your ability to step back and see things a little bit differently. And I like to give this example of a client that I worked with, and this was at a workshop for women that had fibromyalgia. She was dealing with a lot of physical pain in her knees, and she had been on the couch for several days, and she was really frustrated with that. And tapping on the pain, the physical sensation that she was experiencing, how she was frustrated that it was limiting her ability to move the way that she wanted to. During this tapping session, I asked her, is there any benefit that you can think of to having this pain? Which again is a tough question for people, because like your immediate response, or most people's immediate response, might be, no, there's no benefit to the pain. I'm ready to be out of pain. But she really paused and she said, because I'm dealing with this pain, my kids are coming to visit me a lot more often. And so that opened a door for us. Is there a fear that if you are feeling good, that you're not going to have your kids coming over? And so as we tapped on that, she started to feel a shift in the physical sensation that she was experiencing in her knees. I always say, I wish I had recorded that session because it was so cool in real time to have her being like, what's happening? Something's happening. The pain's going away. I don't know what's happening. She was just like really trying to process what was happening as it was happening. It was a very cool experience as a practitioner to witness this happening like this. It made a difference for her. And she's like, oh my gosh, my knees don't hurt right now. I said, what do you want to go do now that your knees aren't hurting? And she said, I'm going to go wash the dishes. It's like, what? Like, that's not what my first choice would be. But I think because she had been in pain and she'd been on the couch for several days and just getting up to go to the kitchen to get herself food and the dishes were piling up, that's what she wanted to do. Big shifts can happen in a small amount of time, too.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that transformation. I find that so fascinating of all the different things that can happen in an EFT session that sometimes you're not prepared for that whatsoever. But fantastic shifts. And I feel like the effects of EFT are also very long term. And most of the things that we work on, we actually end up releasing them and they don't come back. Not to say, of course, life goes on. There are other things that come up and happen. But usually the things that we work on from past trauma and resolve those don't tend to come back. So I do feel that EFT also has a very effective way of clearing things out that might be stuck in our energetic systems or mental or emotional systems and actually moving those out of the body to make space for our healing. And that's another thing I find really fascinating about EFT as well. So yeah, it sounds like such a wonderful modality. And maybe you shared the fibromyalgia, one of your favorite transformations, maybe that happened to yourself or with one of your clients, for our listeners to hear a little bit about what kind of different things we could work on with EFT as well.
Yeah. So another one of my favorite client stories is a woman that came to me who had a real fear of going on elevators. It wasn't like what you see in the movies, somebody gets stuck in an elevator and now she has this fear. Nothing like that had happened, but she just never really liked elevators. And this fear just progressively got worse as she got older. She came to me when she was in her 50s, and it was getting to a point that it was really impacting her life because her partner would want to go to Manhattan for the weekend, but you really can't go to Manhattan unless you're willing to get into an elevator. And like when they would go on trips, if they had their luggage, her partner would have to take the luggage in the elevator and she would have to find stairs to be able to get up wherever she needed to go. She had tried other things. She had tried therapy and tried other things. Someone had told her about tapping and was willing to give it a go. We started with tapping on how she felt when she was in the elevator, and obviously that discomfort with being in an enclosed space. And so we discovered that it wasn't just elevators where she felt this, it was in multiple smaller spaces. Then we started tapping on the anxiety that she would feel, the racing heart, the physical sensations that came along with it. And then we got to a point of, does it remind you of something? Is this bringing up anything for you? And so it did bring up a memory from when she was a teenager that she hadn't thought about in a long time, where she felt trapped. And it was a very uncomfortable situation, and she was able to get out of it. But we're pretty sure that's where all of this kind of stemmed from, this discomfort of feeling trapped. Once we held space for this memory and this past traumatic experience, there was a shift. There was a big shift. And so we worked together for 8 weeks. By the end of the 8 weeks, she had a trip planned. She was actually leaving the next day. After our last session, she left the next day. And she had emailed me at the end of the trip and said that she was able to take every single elevator that came into her path. She didn't love it by any means, but she did it. And it was life-changing for her. And her partner was shocked. That's what she said. She was just completely shocked from when they got to the airport, and she was like, okay, I'll take the bag. She's like, no, I got this. She got on the elevator too. And she was like, whoa, wow. Pretty cool to be able to see that kind of change in a relatively short amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's what it's all about, is helping people find their way back to that quality of life that they've been missing out on due to pain or fear or anxiety or stress. Lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that. If our listeners are curious and they might want to start tapping off for their own issues, their own challenges, what do you have available for programs or services, and how could our listeners connect with you if they want to work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me at my website, which is mindshiftwithlauren.com. And I have lots of free resources. I have a YouTube channel where I put out a tapping video every week. There's tons of videos on there. So hopefully you can find a video for whatever you're dealing with. You can find me on YouTube, Mind Shift with Lauren. I do have a new program that is coming out this fall called Tap and Thrive for Entrepreneurs, which is going to be a 12-week program where we are really going to focus on limiting beliefs and thoughts that come up in your daily life that are impacting your business, your fears of visibility and putting yourself out there, just feeling overwhelmed and stuck, not being able to make decisions, all of these different things, not feeling good enough. I think I see you nodding your head. As entrepreneurs, these are all things that we've been dealing with ourselves. And this is a beautiful program to come together. We are going to be able to support each other, learn all about how tapping can help you with this, and then work together through these issues so that you can move forward and feel good and have the business and life that you're dreaming about.
Sounds amazing. And I guess not just as an entrepreneur, but especially as an entrepreneur, I feel that community is such a huge part of our well-being, and having a group that you can be part of and that will work with you and support you. Entrepreneurship has its own little challenges. It sounds
Yes.
wonderful. And thank you so much for this beautiful work that you do in the world. I feel like it is so needed. And people definitely should give tapping a try and at least just see if it's something they enjoy, if it's something that they feel changes things in their lives and that they benefit from. Because it is actually really simple to learn, and it is very simple to work with a practitioner like yourself on EFT. You don't need any special tools, any special knowledge or skills for it. You just show up and the magic starts in that session. I highly recommend checking out Lauren's offerings, the resources, and also maybe dipping your toes in with taking her program that's upcoming. And we, of course, will be linking to all of Lauren's offerings in the show notes as well. Be sure to check there on how you can connect with her, how you can find the resources. Maybe, like she said, go on the YouTube channel, find a video where you resonate and it's something that you might be experiencing in your life at the time, and try it out. Give it a tap and see where you end up. And if you want to comment on what happens, definitely reach out to Lauren or reach out to me. I always love hearing what happens when our listeners try out some of the approaches and methodologies that we talk about on the podcast. There's always kind of magic that happens when you try out new things and you go, wow, that totally didn't do what I expected it in such a beautiful way. So chat with us. Let us know what's happening. Lauren, thank you so much for spending your time with me this afternoon. I really appreciate it. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and your experiences with our listeners. And I had such a wonderful time going into EFT tapping, and I hope our listeners really enjoyed our conversation as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, thanks so much. And keep on tapping, everyone. And you'll see the magic for yourself if you give this a shot. I'm sure of it. I'm lots and lots of things that Lauren talked about. Like I said, I was nodding my head because that's also been my experience. So thanks so much, Lauren, for joining me today, and take really good care of yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejōrni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.